Thanks, Bernard, for accepting my invitation to join the Inside Sharing Show, and also thanks for inviting Neil to join along the way. So your co-founder of Co-Creating Mutual Value Collaborative, and this program Vivian and I has been running it since July of last year, and that is during the worst time of the pandemic in this part of the world, right? So we saw a lot of anxiety around the people everywhere, and then we decided to do something different, and it's so that we can inject some motivation, inject some inspirations for the people during the challenging time. And the best way in our ability to do is to inject by stories, because we believe in the power of story, and we believe that if we can bring experts in and share their works and share the inspire story that of what they've been doing, and that would be a big and source of motivations for the pupil to reflect, to think, and then to make important change in their lives, right? And you know uh, neither Vivian and I are doing this, ever doing it before, and then we don't do it for a living also, but we decided to do it. And we didn't have a lot of guests back then, so we rely on our bosses, our clients. So one introduced us to the next, one introduced us to the next, and earlier this month, we got over 400 experts around the world in 49 countries, and then last Saturday we had the 50th country, which is Mexico, joining, and they are experts in organizational development, the expert in marketing, in sales, in finance, in IT, and everything. And I came across the interest of knowing of learning the works that you do, Bernard, and I want to know, what, how the journey that lead into the work that you guys are doing. And that's why I approached to you and say, could you please join our program and share to the world, the inspiration that leading you to do the work that you do. So tonight we have not only you, but I also have you in here, and that is a very beautiful thing. So thanks a lot for joining and sharing the work that you do with us. Okay. Yeah, and
Okay.
um, in our culture, you've been to Vietnam, both of you. So you've been to our country before. Um, you may know that it's our great honor for our audience to have you to introduce who you are and the work that you do. First, is that something that we can ask you to do first by Bernard and then to Neil?
Absolutely. Yeah, maybe we can start by talking about um, why we chose to co-found this organization called Co-Creating Mutual Value. And I'll tell my story, and Neil will tell his.
Sure.
Um, I had been working for about 45 years as an organization consultant, and it allowed me to travel around the world. And I met Neil. He was a client of mine many, many years ago. That way, so I met some wonderful people, and I was very, I felt like I had three phases of that work. I was trained originally in organization development back in the 70s, late 60s, 70s, and that was focused very much on small group dynamics and helping people to learn good creative problem solving techniques and conflict resolution and those kinds of organization development areas. And I found that that was exciting and challenging, but I often found that when I called people back, 6 or 12 or 18 months later, they said, well, we had a wonderful time at the retreat and it helped us a lot. But when we got back to work, nothing much had changed. So I was introduced to an area of work in probably the mid 70s or so called socio-technical system design, which focuses on engaging the people in a workplace in redesigning and reinventing their workplace. So not focused not just on, how to manage conflict and how to communicate better, but actually looking at the workflow and how people are organized around the workflow, uh, and looking at all the policies and the structures and the systems that people work within. So the focus really there was on, creating high performance workplaces, places that provided a sense of dignity and meaning to people and a sense of community. And to do that by having the people that know the workplace the best be the designers of the workplace. Um, and of course, the focus was so both on the people and on the flow of the work in the organization. I did that for a decade or so, mostly initially with manufacturing firms, and then as many of the manufacturing companies began to move offshore to other places like China, Vietnam, India, and so on. I switched my practice, or at least my practice switched. I don't think I did it intentionally, but it happened more into the area of working with pharmaceutical research and development and university teaching systems and other kinds of R&D environments. So I had the chance to work with a lot of people. I worked in healthcare for quite a while, healthcare delivery. So I was working much more in things that involved people that were very highly trained and highly specialized, and of course, somewhat, perhaps more than anyone else, resistant to change. So even though our process was very participative, I still found the process, the idea of going in and doing a diagnosis, finding out what's wrong, was something that people were willing to do, but it seemed to suck a lot of the energy out of the beginning of the work, because people felt criticized and they felt they were blaming each other, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was in the I forget, maybe 1980 or so that I came across something called appreciative inquiry. And again, I realized that was something that I could use to approach my work. I didn't have to stop doing organization design, but I could do it from a different perspective. I could invite people to study the best parts of their organizations and to learn from that, as well as the failures, to really study what works and what gives energy and life to them. And that really seemed to be much more acceptable and exciting to many of the groups that I worked with. So those were the sort of three phases: organization development, organization design, and then continuing to do those two things, but from an appreciative perspective, a strength-based perspective. Anyways, as I got older, getting on a plane and being in Hong Kong one day and being in Tel Aviv the next day became more and more difficult, less fun, let's put it that way. And so for a couple of years, I thought about, so what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I'm in I would call it the autumn, the fall of my life, and so I had to ask myself, I'm not the kind of person that likes to go out and golf or play shuffleboard or any of those things. So the question was, how do I spend the rest of my life? And I had known Neil for a long time, and I called him up and I said, hey, what do you think? What do you want to do with the rest of your life? And we talked a little bit about it, and we said, well, let's do something that takes advantage of our background, that leverages our experiences and our skills and our knowledge. But let's not do more consulting, because we were both tired of, consulting work, just not because it wasn't interesting. It was very interesting, but it was very demanding, and we wanted to slow down a little bit. So we formed this thing called Co-Creating Mutual Value because we thought, we've been working with organizations for many, many years, and we know they have so many resources, and they have the capacity to innovate, and they have the capacity to execute, and they have the capacity to, raise money and so on. And we were looking around at the world that we live in, and we felt like, governments are trying to address the problems that we have, and not-for-profit organizations are trying to address the problems, but it doesn't seem like they have enough capacity to really make a big difference in our world. And so Neil and I both agreed that if we could help businesses, corporations, find a way of both making money, because of course businesses have to make money to survive. If we could help them find a way to make money and to use their strengths, to use their abilities, their competencies to address the world's challenges, that would be an exciting way for us to spend the rest of our life. I'll just stop there and let Neil share how he and I got connected and so on.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
lot
I'm
new.
going to start. Yeah. I'm going to start at the end and come back, because obviously I agree with everything Bernard said. The idea that businesses can prosper by solving the world's challenges. It's not while, it's not through, it's by solving the world's challenges. But they need a different mindset, a different way of thinking, a different way of engaging across their ecosystem, all of their stakeholders across that ecosystem, to identify, generate, create those hardcore business opportunities that let them thrive while solving social, economic, or environmental challenges. Most my experiences, most leaders think, well, it's either or. Well, I'll give my employees a day off so they can volunteer. We'll build a hospital. We'll give $1 million, but I still have to focus on my shareholders. And it's one of those things. Part of what we do in the collaborative is research. It's one of those things people know that just ain't so. There are enough examples where you can prosper by solving significant global challenges that my older brother has this great phrase that if it's been done, it must be possible. So there are enough examples of companies that are out there making good money and dealing with real significant challenges in the world. Now, Interface Carpets is one. Some of the work they've done in Indonesia and elsewhere with recycling fishing nets into raw material for carpets that not only have an environmental impact, but the fishermen now have another source of income and stop depleting the resource of fish and dealing with the environmental issue. Patagonia, the work Patagonia does. There are enough examples that say this is possible. But we know that can be a little scary for executives to think about. They're so used to shareholder return, shareholder return, shareholder return. So to give them a picture, a possibility, and an approach that says, we think we can help you do this because we're really good at engaging large numbers of people in some of this redesign work that Bernard was talking about. And when you bring large groups of diverse perspectives and diverse experiences together across the business ecosystem, focused on a real global challenge and making money, it's amazing the innovation that can surface once people break out of these old habits. So that's sort of the end. So that was exciting to me. Being able to help corporations shift that focus from shareholder to stakeholder, from organization to my business ecosystem, what possibilities that opens up for them, for their employees, for their customers, for the planet, for the legacy these people want to leave their children and grandchildren. I found it such a motivating concept. How do we bring I think between us we have 80 years of consulting experience around the world. But how can we use that to actually start making a big difference in the world? Because I spent, I was 10 years an exploration geologist looking for oil and gas, and then 17 years doing internal organizational consulting inside BP, and then went on my own. I met Bernard, many years ago. And Bernard connected me to this field of appreciative inquiry, and it was, again, we should do a whole other show on that.
Well,
just because it's such an energizing way to engage people in dealing with real problems. That's so future focused, possibility focused, understanding what's working, where can we do more of it. So the idea of forming a not-for-profit, and we intentionally formed a not-for-profit, not another consulting company, because this isn't about making money. It's about how can we help corporations do this, and how can we help spread that approach around the world, because we know we're small, we can't have the impact we want. So how can we build that global network of practitioners and leaders who want to do more of this? So.
Bernard, earlier you said that you and Neil wanted to slow down the engine, but the works that you do don't seems to be slowing down at all to me. But it's a bigger impact, and it at a scale also a lot, like more to involve. So it's definitely not a slowing down process. How did you ended up, asking yourself that questions? That create the works that you and Neil is doing that's really impactful and meaningful for operation, for corporation, for the people working for them, and then for the planet Earth, benefiting from it.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on that. One is, in the work that I was doing, I found that when people in a corporation felt like they were connected to doing something meaningful for the world outside, they really became much more excited and alive and energized, But most of the work that we were doing was to help the corporation be more competitive in the world. That was the work, that was the focus of our work. And we were doing it by, helping people to create more effective workplaces and workplaces that were more fun to be in and so on. But the focus was the corporation, and yet I noticed that, the more that people felt like they were doing something that connected to contributing to the world, the more everything else got better. So, so that was one thing. The other thing is, you can't travel the world and work with business without seeing the potential that business has to make an impact on the world, either bad or good, because business is in every part of our lives. The Microsoft Team product that we're working was created by business. The laptop that I'm using was created by business. The light that's shining on me was created by business. So we are in a world that where business impacts every part of our life, and there are of course many examples, unfortunately, of business doing bad things. We call that externalizing the costs of business, right? Or just simply being fraudulent. But there are also examples of business doing great things. Neil mentioned Interface. That's a carpet company, and it's not huge, but it's a significant player, over 5,000 employees worldwide. And one of the things that they did was they recently developed in the last couple of years a carpet. They make carpet in the form of tiles, like squares, and they developed a carpet tile that absorbs more carbon than is used up in the manufacturing process.
Oh, Bernard froze. I'll finish the story. Yep. It's a carbon negative product. It actually is. If you look at the generation of carbon, it actually sucks carbon. Because they're making it and using it the way it does, it has a negative impact on carbon in the environment. And it's profitable. So there are ways to do this. I mean, so people talk about being carbon neutral. Interface wants to be carbon negative. They want to be a net positive company. Very different approach in how you think about business and the impact we're having. I look at, I worked for BP, so I'm biased, but I look at the stances they've taken recently about their impact on the planet and recognizing that the world still needs hydrocarbons as we transition. And yet it's only part of the transition to this carbon neutral or carbon negative world as they move to non-hydrocarbon based products. I finished your story, Bernard.
Thank you. Yeah, did you talk? I'm sorry. Did you talk about the fact that the piece of tile absorbs more carbon?
Yeah, the carbon
So
negative.
the more carpeting they make, the less carbon there is in the world.
Wow.
I mean, think about that. Think about that. Most companies, their goal is to do less harm, but Interface's goal was to fix the world.
Yeah, net positive. Yeah.
Wow.
Net positive.
So they invite you guys to come and work with them in the process, or how?
We did not work.
Not yet. Not yet.
But there are companies like that out there doing innovations.
There are companies like that out there. Yes.
And that's part of what the collaborative does, is research into who's out there, what are the exemplars, what are the processes. But Interface has been doing this for 25 years. It's been quite a learning process. But what we can do now is, with this knowledge and with examples from others, is it doesn't take 25 years to get there anymore. There's so much change in technology, both in how you bring people together and actual technology, that we can speed this process along. But it goes well beyond just the environmental aspect. That tends to be the most visible or public, but what about dealing with the social and economic challenges the world faces? Banks are starting to realize their lending practices have been incredibly biased for years. So they're starting to dabble in, we can change I can only imagine if they brought their whole ecosystem together, what ideas, what opportunities there are for banks to have an even more significant impact on the social and economic challenges we face while prospering.
Vivian and I are really interested on this on the topic of shareholders and their impact and their involvement on the organization under the directions and everything, because a lot of executives, a lot of CEOs, when they got appointed, one of the things they need to do is the returns for the shareholders, right? So because of that, it's the works quite traditionally, you can see everywhere, is that you have to maximize the profit, to maximize the return on investment for the shareholder. So your work is to help organization see a larger picture, beyond the shareholder returns on investment, but now go into the stakeholder investment. So a lot of that will challenge also the shareholders perspective of receiving, but starting to see how they can receive in the longer terms. How do you help organization and shareholder to get into that agreement? So
I think there are a couple of ways. The power of stories, like the one that we just told you, right? So we are collecting many examples that we will be able to publish and share around the world. And as Neil's brother said, if it's been done, it's possible. So examples are always very, very important. The second is that part of what we are learning is, of course, that identifying business opportunities of the kind that we're talking about, opportunities that where the company can use its abilities, make money, and have an impact on social, economic, and environmental problems, opportunities that are at that intersection are sometimes hidden. They have to be uncovered. They have to be discovered. And one of the most powerful ways of doing that is to bring into the room, into a dialogue, voices that aren't usually part of that discussion. So, looking at your ecosystem your business ecosystem, identifying groups or actors or stakeholders that have not typically been part of the conversation, bringing them together in a designed deliberation process to look at possibilities, to assess them, to work with the company to do that. Those are, I think, two fundamental ways.
I would add, I don't know if you're familiar with Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock. I think he has $10 trillion under his control. Every year he publishes a letter to the CEOs of the companies they own. And the last 3 years have all been making this transition from shareholders to stakeholders. And you can't get more capitalistic than Larry Fink. I mean, his business is about making money. And what he said in stronger and stronger language is, if you're not worried about all of your stakeholders, you will not survive. I mean, you can't get more explicit than that. We see there's plenty of data now. Consumers are making buying choices based on the values of the company. Employees don't want to work for companies that are polluting, that are contributing to social unrest. They're making choices that way. Investors, besides Larry Fink, are putting their money in companies because they know it's in the business's self-interest to move this way, because they're not going to survive if the world continues down the path it's going down. What are you going to do when you now have who knows how many millions of people migrating because there's a water shortage in their country? It upends everything. So why don't we deal with these challenges now and bring the resources, the strength, the capabilities, the reach of these companies to work on this? So there is huge pressure on these CEOs and enough data to say, hey, shareholder, I will give you return and I will guarantee the longer term success of our business. So it might not be this quarter, but let me share with you some data. So again, I love the idea of helping them tell stories as well, because there will be pushback.
Yep.
So it's probably a little bit misleading when we talk about it, and we do talk about it this way. It's a little bit misleading to say moving from shareholder to stakeholder, because that makes it sound like we're leaving the concerns about the shareholders behind. And we believe that, making sure that companies are generating a good return on investment in this work is very much a key part of it. Anyone, as Neil can say, can give $1 million to a university, or they can give their employees time to work in the community or stuff like that, right? But to be able to find those business opportunities where the company can make money and they are fixing the world at the same time, that's the key for us.
Wow. And like with the pandemic that happened, it's like another shock wave that hitting companies around the world with challenges, now another kind of challenges. So the level of patience for shareholders on the company and the money that they put out and on the CEOs are a lot less, right? So it makes your story becoming even harder to persuade them. And what challenge do you guys face most now to deal with big corporations if they wanna, to tell them the stories of, looking in the longer terms for the success in the longer terms?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think it takes a lot of courage for a CEO to decide to go this way, particularly, of course, if you are in a publicly held company where the pressure for quarterly returns is very, very strong, and then the combination of saying we're going to invest some money in this area, plus the idea of we're going to try to bring large groups of people together and we've never done that before, and what will happen with that can be scary. But again, I would say that Neil and I have a lot of stories about bringing large groups of people together that are very, very cost effective in the short term. But again, I would say that this is the idea that we're talking about is not really that much different than any other, business opportunity assessment. We're really saying, let's find the opportunities. Let's assess the possibility that they can, begin to give us a return on investment fairly quickly. And let's use all the other metrics that we normally use. I mean, it doesn't have to be a long-term view. I mean, we talked about Interface being on a 20-year journey, and that was a journey of business innovation. For example, as part of the work they did when they were looking for really innovations in their product of carpeting, the tiles, they discovered from nature that if they make their tiles so that there is a pattern that can be easily worked with so that it doesn't show a change. In other words, if the floor in my office is covered, with tiles, right? If there is a certain kind of pattern, then I can easily replace the place where I walk the most, So they created a tile with a design that made it totally possible to pick out one area where there's a high volume of traffic and replace the tile. That made their product so much more attractive to industrial applications, so that a company that, buys their tile for their whole office building doesn't have to replace the whole, everything in the office building. They can just replace the areas that have been worn down. So the innovations that come out of doing this kind of work are just good for business as well as, for the world. So I wouldn't say that, people have to in any way give up the idea of return on investment, but they probably do have to have the courage to say to their investors, it may not be this quarter, it may not be the second quarter, but, it will happen. And, the ex-CEO of Unilever, Paul Pullman, when he was appointed the CEO, he actually said, to the Wall Street analysts, we're not going to focus on quarterly returns. We're going to focus on the economic and financial success of this company. And he got some pushback, but he has been one of the most successful CEOs that Unilever has ever had. So it does take some courage to say, we're not going to put all of our money into getting a good return the next quarter. We're going to do some other things as well.
Say what I would add to that is executives, very few executives like to put their neck out. So where are those groups of like-minded executives, like the Vatican Council for Inclusive Capitalism? Significant global companies coming together to help make this movement happen. So there are a number of groups like that where executives can get the support, the confidence, the ability then to say to Wall Street, hey, wait a minute, they're doing it, so we're going down the same path. So there are a number of ways to make it easier for these executives to make this decision to go down this path.
Have you talked about BP, Neil?
Just a little bit, yeah, in terms of the direction they're going. Yeah. What I like about that approach is taking full responsibility for the transition period, because they're a member of the Vatican Council. They say, the world needs oil and gas. We're going to continue to develop it as environmentally and soundly as we possibly can while we transition to a non-hydrocarbon economy. We're going to work with the communities in which we've been operating for decades to make sure that they don't get lost in the transition. We have thousands of employees tied to hydrocarbons. We're not going to abandon them as we move to hydrogen, we move to solar. So unlike some other companies that, again, just externalized that part of their business and said, oh, we're green. Well, you just sold the oil to somebody else. So I have a lot more respect for those organizations that take full responsibility for helping manage the transition to a better future.
That
So
that
Neil,
was.
I
Yeah.
have,
Go ahead, Vivian. Sorry.
I have I have the question regarding to the market acceptance. If the market is really looking forward for those products and solutions as the equipped for knowledge, would company will support that? How you think if the market is ready for it, for new innovations that gonna give ecosystem or sustainability, and if the market knowledge is enough and equipped, company has to follow. Would that be something you are seeing as a trend or company initiation to do something like that to support the sustainability?
We leave it to Neil first, then.
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question exactly. I want to make sure I answer really what you're looking for. So try me one more time.
Well, so my question is, we talk a lot about the company as a responsibility that they need to look at how they operate and finding the ecosystem and sustainability. So my question is, how about the market knowledge? Even though company will pay a lot of innovation, put a lot of effort, but the market is not educated enough to support that system. How would that last? And in your work, do you see that the market understanding and acceptance is growing at a similar rate as company investment? Yeah.
Very good question.
A couple of things come to mind. One is the ESG reporting, environmental, social, and governance reporting, that many countries are now requiring, the US. So companies not only have to report financial and operational data, they have to report hard data about what are they doing for the environment, for social, for governance. Certainly in the US, certainly in the European Union, India this year is implementing those regulations. So in that respect, part of the market is demanding data on how well companies are doing in this area. So that's part of it. And investors are now investing based on ESG results. More and more money is flowing into those funds that focus on the companies that are doing the best, is part of it. Part of it is, I don't know where to go with this. Two things come to mind. Markets will always go where the profits are, short term.
Yeah.
So I think if companies can show, hey, look, we're delivering shareholder return and we're doing this, it's even an added boost. Now I can feel even better about investing in this company or buying this product. The last thing I'd say is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There's 16 plus 1. So these are very hardcore specified goals that the UN has put in place that companies can sign up to support. They become part of their plan, part of their marketing. And there's an organization called the World Benchmarking Alliance that is providing hard data on how companies are doing on meeting their commitments to the SDGs. So there's more and more data that helps the market decide which of these companies are just blowing smoke, is the English expression, greenwashing, yeah, we're doing great things when really they're not. So there's more data out in the market to let investors know and consumers know who's really backing up their statements. So those three things come to mind about where the market's headed. Bernard, what would you add?
Yeah. Again, I think I have to come back to the idea that companies have most companies that we have worked with have their own internal ways of evaluating a business opportunity, right? And so we don't do that for them, but we help to facilitate the conversations about that. We absolutely think that the business opportunity needs to be evaluated just like any other business opportunity. So this is not, it is about being responsible, but it's about making a profit while you are being responsible, right? So we would we would invite the people in the company that are normally a part of analyzing new businesses to do the work with us. And obviously part of what they will be doing is looking at what is the likely market response to something like this. They will be assessing the viability, the economic viability of a new business innovation. Again, so it's a lot about finding the opportunities for a business that are at that, if I can, imagine three circles, at the intersection of three circles. And, one circle is, can the company do it? And will it be able to make money? A second circle is, does the world want to do it? And the third circle is, does the company want to do it? So it's at the intersection of those three things that good business opportunities, I think, will be pursued. I mean, I think you're right that that we have to look at whether the market is ready for these things, and I'm sure you've heard about the Patagonia thing recently, where the CEO essentially gave his company away.
Yep.
The products that Patagonia sells, for example, are quite expensive, but people buy them because of the values of the company, because of the quality of the product, and the fact that if you buy something from Patagonia and you use it up, you can send it back to them and they recycle it, stuff like that. So I think people are willing to make their consumer decisions based at least partly on what the company is doing to make the world a better place.
And with that being
two things I'd add to that. Remember, our nonprofit is called Co-Creating Mutual Value. We've talked a lot about the organization, but this is about where is the value across the ecosystem. Because the ecosystem, all the ecosystem partners, the actors, it's about creating value across the ecosystem, not the same value. It's going to be different depending on what's their role in the ecosystem. You should tell the Mahindra first choice story, Bernard. So that's a big part of it. The other is a core element of our approach is rapid iteration. We think these are the three best business opportunities. Let's try this one out in this department or in this country or in this state and see, is this really going to work before we go to market wider? So some really good, bringing design thinking to the business innovations rather than putting all the money on pretending we have the best idea and we're going to roll this out around the world. Well, that's a recipe for disaster. So how can we focus on co-creating across the ecosystem, and how can we learn collectively and then start doing more, continuously learn, reflect, adapt as we go forward?
I think the key to this stuff is what the company does, but also, as Neil says, how they do it. So it's partly about having new conversations with people that haven't been part of the conversation before. It's partly about a possibility mindset. It's partly about focusing on making sure that the opportunities meet all the standard requirements for a good investment, and so on, and using the tools that we can give companies, like design thinking tools and appreciative inquiry tools, and work redesign tools and things like that, because we know from our research that unless the company has efficient internal operating processes, none of this will work. So we have to build that in as part of the work.
Bernard and Neil, you mentioned about design thinking a lot, and this concept of innovation through design thinking has been in the market for quite a long time. It's not new, right? And do you see the effectiveness of that in building innovative cultures using the design thinking alone, or is there any other tools that need to come in as a comprehensive and like a complement for design thinking to help building up innovative culture?
I think one of the tools that we use a lot are large group process tools. So like the Appreciative Inquiry Summit or Pure Search or World Cafe or any of those large group processes. For me, it's the combination of using some of those engagement tools with ideas like design thinking. The power of, as Neil said, the power of iteration rather than waiting until you have a final thing where you've invested a lot of money, is to get feedback early on. So bringing some of those ideas into the engagement processes is, I think, very powerful. Neil, you were going to say something.
No, the same thing. The idea of there is no one tool, one approach that's going to make a difference. That's why the CCMV journey involves engaging large numbers of diverse stakeholders in the conversation. We know how to do that. Building on strengths, the idea of what are the resources, the capabilities, the strengths we bring individually and as actors in the ecosystem to generate these new business opportunities. It's taking a whole systems approach, a systems thinking view, because you can't just focus on the people or the process or the work you have to be thinking about how do we design all of those so it works so well together, and how do you bring design thinking so it's about rapid iteration, learning, innovation. So it's that unique combination of these approaches that we think is the key to helping this ecosystem come up with those innovations that are at that intersection of prosperity and solving world's challenges.
Wow, beautiful.
The idea of one tool.
It's not working.
there is no magic tool.
I want to come back to the question that Vivian mentioned earlier regarding to this is coming to a situation that we see quite commonly. The two of you, you guys have a common goals, so that you partner and co-create, right? There's a lot of big organizations out there co-create together with their suppliers, their partner, which is part of the ecosystems, right? And maybe somewhere in the headquarters, that relationship is very, very strong. So the collaboration, the innovations, and the design, everything is really sync, so that they can be, collaboratively create, innovations for the market, for the consumers, and that can help for, be something last longer, building something that can be more user friendly, economical, and social friendly, whatever it is. But the ecosystem span across the globe, right? So in the farther from the headquarters, things go differently. Things become very transactional, and the global relationship doesn't count in here. Instead of protecting for the entity, for the P&L at the year end to secure the seats for the senior manager in that country become more a priority than the global point of view in terms of ecosystem, create something good for the world. So how can we help stopping all of things like that, Bernard and Neil?
It's a great question. My answer would be, I think, and I fully understand painfully your example, because I know that, from lots of work, that the further you get from the people that co-created the thing to begin with, the less understanding and commitment and engagement people have for it. So I think that, we do have to find processes where the co-creation builds connections and emotional relationships with people. And we have tools now to do that with, large group processes that can be done either face-to-face or virtually. And in my experience, using a strength-based, solution-focused, appreciative inquiry kind of process helps the building of relationships tremendously, compared to, let's say, what some people would call a transactional process between, okay, let's get clear, you're my supplier, I want to be clear on what the requirements are, and, are you going to sign the contract to deliver that, which is important too. But the relationship has to be built as well, I think. And the relationship has to be built as part of the problem-solving process, the co-creation process. And so I think if we use the right tools for that, that can help that.
Part of it for me is, well, there are tools now to where you can engage tens of thousands of people in any conversation. It's happening every day. And there are companies that are doing that. But part of it is, how do you engage leaders in the conversation that do you really want to listen to these people? Do you really care what that plant manager in Ho Chi Minh City thinks when you're based in Chicago? And so that's a very direct conversation. Yes, we really do. Okay, we can help you engage them, but you can never go back from that. So be very clear about, once you start on this journey, you can't go back or you will lose everybody.
Wow.
So, and the other thing is, we never tell a company, here's how you need to engage everybody around the world, because we don't know. We work within a core group from the system. Okay, you've got a plant in Ho Chi Minh City, and you've got plants in Argentina. How do you think we could best engage these people in the conversations we're having about X, Y, and Z? They will come up with the solutions because they know their organization. And then we'll figure out, okay, great, so here's how it's going to work for company A, which is going to be very different from company B, from company C, because they're all different. So there is no right way to do this. There is no canned approach to do this. Again, it's the system, the ecosystem that has to figure out, given our boundaries, our constraints, our budget, our environment, some businesses can bring everybody together for 4 days, 5,000 people. Some can't. So let them figure out how to engage everybody, assuming they make that explicit decision to do so.
I think I really admire the works that you, Bernard and Neil are doing to create a better workplace for everybody. And Vivian and I will go to the last question for this conversation today, which is something that we want to create the world in a better way, in our way. And we believe thinking is the core that helps people to thrive. All right, and unfortunately, we also see that the ability to think for people these days are not increasing, but actually decreasing, diminishing a lot. And every chance that we got to talk to experts like you, you two, we would like to ask, how do you help yourself to expand the ability to think? Can you have to answer that question? So if our audience listen to this conversation and they can pick up from your advices and they can apply it to their way of thinking, that will definitely change something for them in the longer term. Can you help to answer that question first, Neil and Bernard?
So the question is, how do we expand our ability to think?
Yep. How do you think? How you expanding it? So.
Yeah. Great question. I love it.
The first thing that comes to mind, Bernard and I are very different people. Our perspectives, experiences might seem similar, but we approach the world differently. And sometimes that can be incredibly challenging. But it's always, I leave our conversations thinking differently because I've spent time with somebody who sees the world differently and thinks differently. So expose yourself to people who don't see the world and think the same way you do, and know it's going to drive you crazy and value it at the same time. So that's one thing that came to mind. The other is I read. In fact, I'm reading a book now about what we can learn about from animal senses, because animals sense the world completely differently. And there was an incredible quote. I have to share it because, again,
please,
it's right here. Here it is. As the writer Marcel Proust once said, the only true voyage would be not to visit strange lands, but to possess others' eyes, to see the 100 universes that each of them sees. Let us begin.
Wow.
So how can you see others' perspectives, try to understand how they see the world, and just look for every opportunity to see things differently. So,
absolutely.
And pause, reflect, think.
So
Even if it's only 5 minutes, 5 minutes.
so read, pause, and expand the network, right? Talk to the people with different background from you, and
And listen.
listen. Wonderful. How about you, Bernard?
I think Neil pretty much said it all. We are overwhelmed every day with information, right? We have thousands of times more information that comes at us every day than people 100 years ago. I'm so thankful to Neil and my other colleagues when they send me a story or something that says, hey, this is something that I just learned about. I want to share it with you. So I think the one thing that I would add to Neil's list of things is be willing to share with your colleagues and your friends the things that excite you, the things that give energy and life and meaning to you. I think that's really important because it's a value both to the people that you share it with, but I think it's also a value to me when I share something, or Neil when he shares something with me. The sharing process is exciting.
Wow. Thanks a lot for sharing that, Bernard. And Vivian and I are working on a book called how we help people to think through the collective of answers from the people like you. And so we break it into the acronym, like thinking is a THING, right? So the G, that's a G in there that we really commonly see in a lot of answers is generosity. So if we can be generous of sharing our ideas, we get a lot more ideas to come back, even bigger idea, deeper idea, and ideas with a lot of support from amazing people around us. So I think that the sharing today is very meaningful for us. We run a poll check on LinkedIn the other day, and we got 88% of the people participating into that survey, saying that they believe generosity plays a very critical part of our ability to think. So instead of holding off things that we know that we think is good for us, if we share it, we will receive a lot better. So thanks. Okay.
You're welcome. One of the reasons that we set up our group as a not-for-profit was because we have a commitment to research and learn things and to test them out. But the other commitment that we have is to freely share everything that we learn. Because we know that as we share, we will be rewarded with relationships and with other ideas.
Wow. Thanks a lot. I said earlier that I will ask that question as a last question, but I would like to ask Neil the last question, and that is for Neil only. All right. And I want to bring you to the point back when Bernard called you and asked you to join him into this journey. How did you feel back then?
My immediate answer was yes. Yeah, I'd known Bernard a long time. We had an ongoing relationship, so it was yes, because I know how much my thinking gets pushed. How I'm always at my learning edge in this work and in conversations with Bernard. So it was, I have no idea where this is going to go. It reminds me of a client I had. Bernard and I supported me on this. We had the entire business in the room for 4 days, 750 people. He flew them from Pittsburgh to Las Vegas for 4 days, a big, large group engagement. And when we were
you might say the gamble.
It was, well, and I'll never forget, because he invited me to talk to his top 30 when he was thinking about doing this. And we said that we're going to bring everybody to Las Vegas for 4 days. And they said, Roger, you're crazy. And he was in the back of the room and he said, and I quote, I don't know what's going to happen and I'm committed.
Wow.
That's sort of how I felt about, I don't know what's going to happen with this, but let's see.
Wow.
So
thanks a lot.
Being able to enter into that. So I don't know what's going to happen and I'm committed. That's the response I would like from every executive.
Yeah. I think if if we can have friends, and if people can have friends like the two of you having, that can help one to expand and and continue to grow, that we're definitely so beautiful. So I wish there's a lot of people out there can build a relationship like that, can work together to create something bigger than what they think individually they can do. And the world is connecting, so I'm so thankful for the opportunity to know Bernard, and today to know Neil also. And it's been years you haven't been back to Vietnam, Neil, and for Bernard it's also a couple of years you're not yet back in here. So probably it's a good time to pay our country a visit and look at the motorcyclists on the ice and walk on the street.
Right,
It's not going to
right.
be the same. I, on behalf of the audience of the Inside Shining Show, I would like to say thank you so much for joining to our program and be so generous to share your ideas and for doing amazing works that can help building the world better workplace for everybody. So thank you very much for doing that.